Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my humble home in Livingston, Montana. Today's date is Sunday, the 6th of December of 2020, for whatever that means. It mostly puts me on an even keel so I know what time and date it is, Okay, I got a little story to tell you. This is not per se from my childhood. I'm real famous, I guess, or infamous. Actually, I'm not famous for anything, but I tell a lot of my crazy childhood stories. But this particular incident happened right after I got out of the service, right after I got out of the United States Army. IETS, discharged from the United States Army exactly on the 5th of December of 1973. Okay, I lived in a place I discharged to my hometown, which at the time was Polson, Montana, right there by Flathead Lake and all that. All you have to do is look up in northwestern Montana and you'll see a big lake up there. That little town, well, it's not that little, but that little place that's on the south shores of Flathead Lake is Polson, Montana. That's where I graduated from high school. Okay. All through the spring, I was just taking odd jobs. I couldn't find work, steady work, and it was a real pain in the rear end, I mean, just spot work, if you will, And anyway, I got to partying kind of heavy, drinking beer, smoking that left-handed tobacco. You know what I'm talking about. You probably got some, or your neighbors do, You know that ditch weed, all that kind of stuff? Yeah, sure you do, Anyway, because back in the day, they didn't have all the fancy strains that they got now, and half of America's, puffing on weed and all that. And I know what the trip is, because up here in Montana, this is a medical marijuana state and all that, so there's no reason why this can't be talked about, okay? Even though it brings a little incrimination on myself, which I don't care, otherwise I got no story here. But all through the spring and into the summer months, I'd been hanging around with a few of my buddies and partying a lot, and I was thinking, in my mind, I was thinking I was getting a little bit too carried away. A little bit too much smoke, a little bit too much beer, and all that, and I never did do them hard drugs and all that stuff during that time period. And whatnot have you. So I told these two buddies of mine, I said, look, I want to take a little backpacking trip up into the Rockies. Right there in that Mission Valley where Ronan and Polson had, the Rockies are bigger than all life itself. The Continental Divide and all that's right there. Basically the Rockies extend from Big Fork, Montana, clear to down there to somewhere around St. Ignatius and beyond. Well, anyway, in between Ronan and Polson, there was a trail that started you up into the mountains, and I was going to go up to a place called Cedar Lake. Actually, I went quite a few places because I stayed up there for, like 4 days or something, 4 or 5 days, I just wanted to get away from, just clear my head, just because I kind of figured, like I say, I was partying too much, and all this other stuff. And so these two crazy buddies of mine, it's hard to tell stories like this, guys, without, trying to keep a straight face. But these two buddies of mine, I back in those days, I had a 1963 Ford Falcon station wagon. Ford station wagon. And I gave my station wagon to these two best friends of mine, and I said, take care of this, and then try to find me once I get out of the mountains. I didn't even have a good plan of getting back to town, except for the Soul Express, but I was used to all that. So they take me up to right where the mountains start, where the trail is and everything, and they drop me off and told me to be careful and all this stuff. And I remember I had an old 30-06, but it didn't belong to me. Bolt action 30-06. To this day, I can't remember what make it was, what model it was, and I had to borrow it from my brother because I was in between rifles. It was actually my brother's rifle, So I borrowed this .06, because that country up there, definitely grizzly bear country, all through that Mission Range up there. Back when I was a kid growing up, there was dozens and dozens of people I used to get mauled up in that area. Well, anyway, so I go on this trail and I pass a lot of lakes. There was Mud Lake number 1, Mud Lake number 2, Mud Lake number 3, and and following this stream, if you will, or this waterway that was just literally flowing or water falling down the mountain, basically, you followed this all the way up until you got clear up to the top. And once you were on the top, you were basically on the top of the Continental Divide. And down the other side, well, you had a few more miles to go. You dropped off and you went down to this place called Cedar Lake. And this was one of I can't remember if this was the first night I went up there or the second night, but it doesn't matter. It was one of the nights that I went up in those mountains, just had a backpack with some food in it, that old 30-06 with a few extra shells and whatnot have you. And of course I had me a little sack of, my favorite, Mexican ditchweed, Because back in them days, nobody knew how to grow, proper medicinal weed. And by the way, Montana is a medicinal marijuana state, cannabis or whatever have you. And I'm not trying to turn anybody into a drug addict or whatever have you, but it's just the way it is. Anyway, I had me a little weed with me and all that stuff, because, like I say, I did those things back in them days. But I get up, I get down there to the Cedar Lake. I remember this all too well, and it was like 5 o'clock. And up in those mountains, the long shadows, that's when it started to get dusk. The long shadows start. They start about 5, no later than 5:30ish or something like that. So, man, I get me a fire going, and I get me a little bit of something to eat and all of that kind of stuff, And by the time I get all that done, she's getting dark. In fact, it was dark, So I had my sleeping bag kind of laid out, but I made sure I wasn't too close to the fire because I didn't want to burn my sleeping bag up because I've done that before, believe it or not. Excuse me. Anyway, I pull out this little baggie with this left-handed tobacco. You know what I'm talking about? Sure you do. You got some. You do. Don't lie to me. I'm just kidding. Don't get twisted. I'm just telling you what I did. Anyway, I pull my Easy Rider bag out, and lick me a couple of papers, because back in them days, I didn't know nothing about it. Pipes and bongs and hookahs and all this other nonsense, and smoking out of exhaust pipes and whatever have you, So I spin me up one, twist me up a left-handed, some little left-handed Mexican, some of Mexico's best, with seeds and all, the things that blow up in your face when you're, you did it yesterday. Anyway, now listen, I'm just kidding you. You laugh along here. You're too serious, I can tell. But I'm sitting there, it's dark, it's like 7:30 or 8 o'clock or something, and I'm bored out of my skull, nobody to talk to and everything, so I start burning one, man, and I get about halfway done with this Mexican dirt weed or whatever I had going on there. It was marijuana, but believe you me, it wasn't like the stuff they got now, whatever, the Cushes and the Diesels and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden I started looking around, and the wind had kicked up. And boy, them big old pine trees up there on that Continental Divide, they start. Yeah, I had to get the sound effect in there. The old wind would start blowing through there. And man, that old pot started working on my noggin, and I started looking around, and my eyeballs got about this big, and then I started thinking about grizzly bears, and I started, having a panic attack. I almost grabbed my chest and stuff, and I thought to myself, man, this ain't cool, man. Here I am up here all bug-eyed, all by myself, and I lay prey to all these wild animals like grizzly bears and stuff. And I really started freaking out, freaking out and getting paranoid. You guys know, you did it, this morning or whatever. Well, anyway, I decided that the best thing for me to do was crawl down into the bottom of my sleeping bag. Are you with me? I figured, man, the best thing I could do is just, and I kind of that old 30-06 was outside my sleeping bag, but I kind of tried to drag it in there the best I could, and I get down there in that sleeping bag, and I'm sitting here to tell you, man, I really didn't like the smell of my socks down there. You follow? I really didn't like the smell of my socks down there, and I couldn't breathe very well, and I tried to open up the sleeping bag, and I was all kinds of screwed up. So I flipped myself around and got back out of there, and I told myself, man, this just isn't going to work. So I took let's pretend like this is my little feather duster, but let's pretend like this is my 30-06. I take this 30-06, and I am not kidding you. I just hugged it like my honey. You know what I mean? My Saturday night honey, And I just curled up and put my legs, my legs were all up and, wrapped around the stalk and everything. And the old end of the barrel was right about my face and everything. And I threw the sleeping bag over my head and everything. And that's the only way I could get to sleep. Okay, well, the next morning, I wake up, and boy, let me tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing like waking up in the morning with the fresh smell of gunpowder in your nose. Because that old 30-06 barrel was right close to my nose. I slept with that thing, tight, like with your girlfriend. You know what I mean? And so I didn't do any of that the rest of the trip while I was up there all by myself, because it just wasn't any fun. But I remembered that all too well, and I thought, well, I don't know if I want to tell that story on YouTube or not, but I thought, I don't care. I mean, listen, guys, I'm going to say this and quit. I've been contemplating for weeks now, and I haven't been doing any griping, I haven't been doing any, politicizing, and all that, but I personally think that America's in terrible shape. I really do. With this coronavirus and the government screwing up and all this, bogus election thing, and this year right here is probably, outside of my Vietnam days, this is probably the worst time period in the year 2020 that I've ever seen. And if, as Americans, if that's one thing that we need, is humor, so that's why I decided to kind of stay away from, politics and all this stuff. But I'm going to say this and quit. Don't think that I don't know what's going on, because I do know what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for visiting me here in my home. Take it easy. We shall see you on down the trail. Don't smoke too much of that left-handed tobacco. I don't care. Smoke as much as you want to. And we shall see you later. Adios, my friends.